Well, another vendor's software demo is crashing and burning. Your technology director and your DevOps lead appear to be playing buzzword bingo with every piece of marketing jargon the presenter mentions. Your general manager's eyes are glazing over as the topics get a little too technical. And even though the person presenting really seems to know their stuff, no one seems to be addressing the elephant in the room, the fact that they're actually your CEO's cousin. Isn't there a way to make this a better use of everyone's time? If lackluster demos have been an obstacle to making an informed decision around new software for your organization, keep listening. We're going to be breaking down some of the most effective strategies for making the demo phase of your software selection process heaps more relevant to your organization's specific needs. Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. My name is Galen Low with the Digital Project Manager. We are a community of digital professionals on a mission to help each other get skilled, get confident, and get connected so that we can elevate the value of project management in a digital world. If you want to hear more about that, head over to thedigitalprojectmanager.com. All right, today we are talking about the process of selecting new software for your project teams, and specifically, how to cut through the sales pitch of a software demo and make sure that the tool is not only the best tool, but also the right tool for the way that your teams work. With me today is Olivia Montgomery, an Associate Principal Analyst at Capterra and former IT PMO leader who now advises small and medium businesses about software selection. Hello, Olivia.
Hi, Galen. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back on the show. How have things been for you in Austin?
Things are pretty exciting. We have South by Southwest going on, and it is back in person since
Ooh,
first time since 2020. So the city is vibrant, and there's so many events and talks and all sorts of things going on. It's pretty exciting this week.
back at it. Back at it. South by Southwest, I'm super excited about. It's like all in my social media feed and everything like that. I've never made it down to Austin, but such a vibrant like musical community. There's so many things happening, and just so many conferences and ways for people to get together and have a good time. So now
Yeah.
it sounds to me like I have no excuses anymore. This might be the year. This
It's
might be the year.
yeah, it's pretty cool. It definitely having tech tracks. So I've been able to attend talks from supply chain leaders, the CEO of Amtrak. John
Wow.
Deere is here really driving, their tech focus. There's VR experiences that are really focusing on storytelling in new ways, ranging from really heavy, serious topics to lighthearted entertainment and just how we can interact with content and each other differently.
Very cool. What's been your favorite so far?
So, aside from all the like actual tech and innovation we're seeing, I got to see the new Batmobile in person. And I
Ooh,
have to say that's a highlight for me. I'm a
yeah.
film buff. I don't watch trailers. So I haven't seen any trailer. I haven't seen the Batman yet because of South by, but I saw the Batmobile for the first time in person. So that's pretty cool.
I think that's probably better than a trailer.
I think so. I think so. I'm like, okay, I get it. I see the vibe. I'm really excited to see the movie now.
That's what I'm looking forward to more of, as things open up again, right? Just
Yeah,
like running
exactly.
into the unexpected, the things you didn't plan to do
Yep,
are,
exactly.
are back in front of you. Awesome. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about the most pressurized and doubt-inflicting part of the software selection process, which is the demo. So let me just start by setting the scene. Let's say you've been tasked with finding a new tool for your organization, and you're either the sole decision maker or you're chairing the selection committee. You've put in countless hours defining use cases, you've been soliciting requirements from the team, you've been establishing budgets with your leadership, and you've been doing a whole bunch of research online. And finally, you're at a point where you've got your short list of tools that seem to fit the bill, and now you want to see them in action. So, why is this pressurized and doubt inflicting? Well, I think it's mostly because this is the literal culmination of all your efforts to date. You are wrangling all the stakeholders, you're trying to communicate all the requirements effectively to your software vendors, you're being asked to absorb a ton of information and react on the spot, and it all takes place in the most pressurized environment of all, a meeting. So I thought maybe, with all that said, let's start with the naysayer arguments. Like, should a team or an organization Should they even bother with a demo? Isn't it just a sales pitch?
Do demos, please, please. I understand I have sat through my fair share of demos that are very sales heavy. And that's a lot of when I started percolating the ideas of how to make these better. I
Mm.
do believe in the process of demos. And there's a lot of prep and a lot of work, especially the project manager, that you can do um, to make them one of the more important pieces of the selection process. So, yes, do demos, but they're not quite as easy as, following the vendor's lead. I think that's where some people can go wrong. You really want to drive and set the requirements essentially for what you want to see in the demo.
I mean, I think that's all fair. Also, I mean, these tools have a lot of depth to them, right? In a lot of cases, we're picking a tool to do a lot of different things and be a lot of things to different people. But is it even possible to cover that much ground in a demo beyond just like skimming the surface in terms of like basic features of a software? Or what strategies should an organization consider to make sure that they get the answers that they need?
Yes, great question. So, first off, no, you can't cover everything in a software demo. That's where your previous research online, is going to come in. And if you do like the RFP process, or when you get down to your final two or three, vendors that you're looking at, have them send you all that information in a document. The demo isn't exactly the best place to go through all the functionality that you need. You want to hone in specifically on what the user interface looks like and the couple of key user stories that your team needs to follow, like what business processes need to be supported by this tool. And honestly, do the users like the way it looks and feels? This might be their first time getting into a tool and seeing the interface. And so the look and feel is going to be more key here. The list of actual functionality should be written out, before you sign a contract.
I think that's really important, and thank you for that because I kind of framed it earlier as this culmination, right? All these roads lead towards this demo, but actually, the demo just kind of fills in some of the gaps. It's actually part of that research process. There are things
Exactly.
that you need to see them in action in order to get a feel for it. Like you said, the user interface, right? Certain use cases. It's not going to be, hey, I did all this research and I can do all these things. I've looked at the sort of comparison chart and now show me every feature in a 2 hour period. That would probably not go well. It's actually
Right.
great. I think we know all of this. We've seen all of this on paper. You've sent additional details to me, and now let's schedule a demo where we can actually like dig into a few things that matter.
Exactly. And I actually strongly recommend scheduling two demos.
Hmm.
I like a business facing demo and then a technical demo. Combining them would make it a very long, complicated meeting, and half of the stakeholders wouldn't be interested in the tech side, and the other half wouldn't be interested in the business side. So I
Hmm.
recommend splitting them for respect of your stakeholders' times. And also, you need different people in those meetings. It's not the same people. So I strongly agree that it is kind of it's a vetting step, but also still more requirements gathering from the vendor. And yeah, so schedule two, we're discussing it's a project management tool, it's an accounting tool, a new ERP system, whatever software tool you're looking at. I like to follow kind of the same demo structure. So yeah, the first one is business facing. Have your business owner there. That's probably a little more obvious, but you also want to include your power user. Um, Oftentimes it's a supervisor, in the role, a lead in the role, the person who uses it on a daily basis. Purpose being, this will ensure that you are looking at the tool from both like the strategic long-term point of view. The business owner can, decide like, yes, this tool will support our growth. This tool will support where we're going. But you also need the power user there to see their particular user story. They want to know that their key function that they have to do can be done and what that looks like and what it feels like. Sometimes I've heard from PMs that they can't always get the buy-in to have a power user in, one of the demos.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's too early. Um, a myriad of excuses, but your power user is going to follow through the rest of the project too. They're likely end up being your QA person during the actual implementation. They're your main source of user requirements. They're the team that's going to use it. They got to be happy with the look and feel, which again, the demo is really a vetting of the look and feel. So you want to make sure both of those people are in that demo. And another way to help set that up is gather user stories from the team, and at least one or two from that power user, and send them to the vendor long before, so at least multiple days before the scheduled demo, so that they can set up the system to walk you through exactly that user story. You want to be able to say, as an accountant, I need to run the month-end close report within a 24-hour time period so that I can, close out the accounting month. You need to actually see that in the tool happen. Having a user story won't be defining exactly, oh, I want to see this particular function in the tool. It opens it up that maybe this tool has innovated a way to achieve, or execute a function that maybe you haven't seen before. So you
Hmm.
don't want to pigeonhole them by saying like, only show me this. But you also do, I don't know, you got to be open. But the general sense, the power user needs to be able to see their key function. And your business owner is also going to have requirements that they want to see. Typically, the executive dashboard. What does it look like? What does the tool look like when I log in as the manager, the leader, the CEO? How do I pull my reports on my dashboard? That's again another, what those look like and feel like. You need to see those and ask the vendor to enter in dummy data for you. It typically will set up a sandbox for your demo, have them preload, some dummy data so you can actually get a look and feel for the reporting structure.
That's really cool. I love this notion of kind of splitting the pack. It seems kind of counterintuitive sometimes when it comes to like a decision making process, but I like the idea that there's two different demos because there's two different conversations that need to be had about this tool, and it actually comes down to the best use of people's time. And I think what you were saying about that, sometimes we get pushback. It's like, no, we don't want to involve, our accounting power user at this stage because it's
Mhm.
too early in the process and yada yada yada. But actually, um, you know, a that is part of the conversation in terms of assessing, like you mentioned, right, the long term use of the tool, but also the depth of use of that tool. And frankly, just vetting and making that person, the power user, like a bit of a champion of the selection process because they were involved and they were there. And if they weren't, then actually they might be the loudest voice in the room saying that it was a bad decision. I like what you said about a sandbox. And for some people, I think, at least the processes I've gone through for software selection, it's kind of like do the work and then demo, you kind of sit back and watch. And then you have like your, okay, give me a hands on environment where I can take the things that you just showed me in the demo and try them out for myself. But is there a world where actually people are trying it out for themselves in a sandbox environment during the demo, like a hands on demo?
I'm sure power users out there would love the chance to do that because some of the pitfall is you want to pick the software tool that's right for your current state processes
Hmm.
and future state. And sometimes a demo just will focus on future state. And sometimes the idea is, oh, when we get this tool, our processes are going to evolve dramatically and mature automatically with all this automation that we're going to be able to get, when that's
Hmm.
not the reality. And your power user is going to be able to know, okay, from day one when we use this, it doesn't satisfy our current state, but also support future state. So I might think getting into the sandbox ahead of time could help, your power user know, like, yeah, I could use this today and my job will still get done and we're not going to turn it on and lose all functionality. Yeah.
I like
All
that.
right. I don't know if your technical teams would really appreciate or care or have the
Hmm.
time to go in and do that. Again, I am a big proponent of being very transparent, being very forthcoming. Talk to your stakeholders, talk to the vendor about what you need and what their ideas are. So you are cutting through the sales pitch by not letting them drive the demo fully, but you do also want, they know the solution. Maybe they have some innovative ways to approach a problem that you hadn't thought about before. So you want to be open to that too.
I love that. Let's talk a bit more about preparing for these demos, these two demos. Do you have any great stories or examples about like use cases that a team should ask to run through to make sure the software works that they do? Or even just like the process of gathering those user stories, like you said, in a way that is not sort of constraining it too much. So it's not like, oh, just show me this one thing. But if the software approaches it a different way, that's something that the team can have a look at.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're lucky enough to have, an IT business analyst that can go in and gather all your requirements for you, that's fantastic. That's not common. And even if you do have that person, your power user they might not have ever given you a user story before or given requirements before. They need some help. Something that I've done in the past that I kind of like is I've sent out a survey to the team, the power user, the leads of the department of who's going to be using it. And I give them kind of a Mad Libs style to give them the structure. Your user story is and then your job function. I need to be able to, and then your job function so that I can, and then the reason that you're doing it. And it's already kind of a Mad Lib, and it helps them really quickly be like, okay, yeah, I can fill these blanks in, and it's quick, it's easy for them. They understand, what's going on, and then you're able to take that exact user story and send it to the vendor to be like, this is exactly what I want to see. So yeah, I kind of like a Mad Libs approach.
I love that. I'm a huge fan of Mad Libs and user stories, and here they are combined. So I think that's a great way to
Yep.
look at it. That kind of leaves the door open, right, for the vendor especially to shape a demo that shows how their software will address that, while also still making sure that that's a thing that the team can get some affirmation and confirmation on that it will do this thing, and here's how you go
Exactly.
about doing that.
Yep.
That's very
Exactly.
cool. I like
And
that.
that seeing it and knowing that you like the look and the feel is again, a big driver of the business facing demo. I also
Mm.
talked about the second demo being a technical facing one. This is where your user stories can include like how often do these jobs run? Do we have to
Mhm.
wait? Can we schedule the jobs at 1 a.m.? It's going to run for an hour. And is that acceptable to the business? Do we need it more often, less often? Do we have the capabilities for it? That's where you want to make sure that your technical leads and the vendor's technical lead is on the demo for that side. You need to know, your sysadmin needs to know, how this tool functions. Whoever is kind of owning and running your IT architecture, whoever your engineer is, they need to know, where is data being stored? Is the vendor hosting it? Are you okay with that? Are you hosting it? Do you know where? There's so many very technical details that if you wait until you're signing a contract to have those conversations, you can have some very unhappy surprises come up. So you need to have that part of the vetting process, and having the two technical teams together, answering their questions and showing, exactly what it looks like and discussing capability. They can ask questions like, oh, is this going to require custom code? Is this functionality, out of the box? These are the kind of questions your business owner and your power user aren't going to know. And sometimes as a project manager, unless you're a technical project manager, you might not know either. So you need to ask these questions. And you also want to know about integrations. You want to ask, do any of your current existing clients have an integration with X and Y, your specific tools? Don't be afraid to name the tools that you're using and ask, do you currently have integrations with these tools? Again, when you're going for a bigger, name company, that might not, might be obvious. You might have to ask a little more probing questions, but for smaller companies, you want to know. And again, it can, if they don't have an existing or an out of the box integration, is that a deal breaker for you? You want to know, okay, do we have to build out this custom integration? Do we have the resources for that? Is the vendor willing to do that for us? Do we have the time? Do we need all those kinds of conversations can happen? And it does sound maybe like it would be a bloated conversation, but I promise you it's really not. If you've kind of done your prep, your technical teams know what they need to ask. Um, and you're saving yourself a whole lot of headache if you wait any longer in the process, honestly.
I think that's a huge point, right? That there's so much to cover. It could be a bloated conversation. We do want to sort of zero in on certain use cases, but even still, like a piece of software, we're talking about a CRM or ERP system, heck, content management system. It's going to need to do a lot of different things in terms of those use cases, and that will take time to sort of demonstrate and have a discussion around. So just wondering, to keep it from becoming a bloated conversation, how do you select and prioritize the use cases and the questions that you want your vendor to address?
Yeah, this is a huge question. And I say you got to rely on your team leads, your business leaders, your power user. You've got to talk to them before the demo and say, okay, what are your main concerns? What do you want to make sure that we cover? Let them tell you what's most important. Again, if you're a very technical PM, you can drive those conversations and that's great, but a lot of us aren't. So rely on them. Ask them, be like, hey, what are the 2 or 3 things you've got to see? And I'm going to make sure that during the actual demo, we cover them and we stay on track. Because, yeah, you need to facilitate during the demo as well. If someone wants to get too deep into something, you can say, like, hey, for vendors are typically very good at this, at time management. They've done a lot of demos of their products. They can help with that. But also don't be afraid to chime in and just be like, hey, I want to make sure that we cover, the 3 points. But in order for that to work, you do have to have your prep talk with the people who are going to be in the demo and say, okay, these are the 3 things. That way they're not surprised. That way, like, they don't feel cut off. They don't feel like you're interrupting them or you're dismissing them. They know, they're like, oh yeah, okay, back on track. We'd already agreed that this is the track we're staying on, and it helps, not feel dismissed.
I mean, I think it's a really important point that in the role of a project manager, if you're managing this process, there are areas where you have control and are responsible for setting this up. But there are some decisions that really do lie in the hands of, even for a software selection project, you will have your sponsor, right? The decision makers, as you said, the leadership team, and we need to rely on that decision-making process, like that leadership team, to prioritize what it is that we want to get out of, especially something like a demo, and still, have that process of going through and gathering input from all the various teams that might need to use it, so that they're filling in, the Mad Lib, and they're having their use
Exactly.
case sort of logged and documented, and ultimately have a voice in the process.
Right. And you can remind people too that in the demo you are trying to cover, the very focused, 3, maybe 4 user stories that you've, again, pre-sent to the vendor so that they know and they're ready. And anything past that you can ask to be written out in your RFP or in your, whatever. There's all kinds of terms out there for that. But you can always say, yes, we need documentation on this. What's the cost? Because you also want from the vendor after the demo a breakdown of, okay, this is custom code. You asked for this specific functionality. This is how much we think it'll cost. We will build it for you, or you'll have to, you can have a front end developer, your sysadmin. Software in general is moving toward low code so that your front end, sysadmin, even your business side, your power user can set up a lot of workflows in these low code solutions. But you need to know that. Do they have to write it? Do you have to do it? Same with integrations. So to stay out of the weeds too much when in the demo, just, remind everybody, like, yeah, let's get this in documentation, the details. and move along with the actual watching the software work.
I really like that. I want us to come back to something.
Mhm.
I wanted to come back to this notion that we've kind of split the pack in a way, right? We've set up two demos. One is more a business focus, right? Get your power user in there, look at the UI. The other one is more of an IT focus. Have the conversations about like the infrastructure, the integrations, the cron jobs and the scheduling that you might need to have running in the background.
Yes.
But then at some point, this needs to come back together again as well.
Mhm.
We split the pack, and they're having these conversations, and they're evaluating based on different conversations. And I'm just wondering, should the entirety of the selection committee like, build a scorecard of some sort, just so that they have like apples to apples comparisons between shortlisted products, like a way to kind of document their thinking, so that when they come back together as a group, they are able to sort of quantify and evaluate their thoughts and opinions and feelings about the software? Or is that kind of maybe an outdated way of looking at it? Because as you mentioned, right, products are so different these days. Software is so different, and a lot of them might even be, I don't know, maybe some of them are too complex to compare using a rubric. What are your thoughts on that?
I love that you brought up vendor scorecards. I am a huge fan. I think they absolutely still have a place, not outdated at all. Anytime that you can take out and reduce emotional reactions, which is a pitfall of sales pitch heavy demos, you need to be able to take out the emotions and remember why you're getting software in the first place. And it helps you be like, okay, the problem we're solving for, and you have it written out, and then you can compare how each vendor, so you're like, oh, this vendor was really cool,
Mm.
but when you come back to your scorecard that has, questions like, does it meet our functionality and, the business side and the technical side? Because if it doesn't meet both, it's not a great fit. Even if your business owner loves this one particular tool for probably an emotional reason, without a scorecard or some kind of standardized rubric, you don't have a paper trail of how you're making
Mhm.
the decision. And they're useful during decision making discussions. And also, as a project manager, I highly recommend storing and saving those every single time,
Mhm.
because you never know when the project's going to get audited. You never know when people are going to come up and ask questions.
Mm.
You don't know if they'll want to replace the software in a couple of years' time. And you want to know, like, okay, why didn't we go with this vendor the first time? And you'd be like, oh, it's because they scored a 1 on the integration scale. Okay, when we circle back to talk to them, do they have these integrations built out now? Great. That you have an informed, educated decision making process. So I fully support, endorse, and love vendor scorecards. And it is a way to take, as you said, this desperate information and combine it together, that, and everybody can see each other's scores, whether you do one big vendor scorecard,
Mm.
or each key stakeholder does one and then you collate them all together. That's going to depend on the size of your business, the size and complexity of the system, your project management tool. You're probably going to have a lot of different leaders fill out their own scorecard. And then as a project manager, you'll bring them together. And yes, save them, save them too. Because another instance I've personally experienced, I was at a business and our CTO changed
Mm.
shortly after we had a new ERP system. And of course, she came in, she wanted to know, like, why do we use this tool? How did we pick this vendor? Whatever her, emotional response was to it, I was able to go through and be like, no, this was a very informed, educated decision that we made. This is why. And not only that helps like relationship building with that new stakeholder, it also helps them understand their business. They just came into a new company, and they understand
Mm.
like, oh, okay, yeah, this is where we're at. Um, so yeah, you never know when they're going to come up. And if you work for a publicly traded company,
Mhm.
especially, the auditors are going to go through They need to know that you're not just like giving your business to your brother's software company.
Hmm.
They need to know that you went through and made this decision, you know, in a measured, standardized way.
There's three things I wanted to dig out in what you just said, because there was
Yeah.
so many good things. One, what I'm hearing is that, I think some of us think of vendor scorecard, as like being very generic, right? It's like
Hmm.
UI score on a scale from 1 to 10. And that might be useful, but then I think what you're saying is actually put that specificity in. What are you trying to achieve? Why are you getting a new piece of software? That is the rubric. It's like, will this
Exactly.
allow us to, on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't know, I'm just making this up. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well will this allow us to, whatever, plug into the rest of our software ecosystem and integrate to create fluid, streamlined, automated processes? Um, and maybe even more specific than that. I'm just kind of riffing, but that is the
I
question on the
actually
scorecard.
like them, vendor scorecards, a little less specific. So, like for the
Hmm.
scale, for instance, 1 to 10 can be a lot. I typically recommend bringing them down to just 1 to 5
Ooh.
and defining what does a 1 mean. Um, is that it can even be as basic as meets expectations, doesn't meet expectations, exceeds expectations, or they don't even have it. Then it's a 0.
Non-existent,
Um,
yeah.
so I do like 1 through 5. I think it's a little more clear. You force people to be a little more definite in their answer.
Hmm.
It makes the math more simple, especially, if you weight the criteria individually. Yeah, keep a 1 through 5 is kind of where
I
I'm,
really like that. I'm thinking through all
yeah.
of those like net promoter score surveys that I get. How likely are you to recommend this tool to a friend? 0 through 10. And yeah, I'm like scratching my head. They're going like, I wonder what a 7 means. 7? Am I
Right.
a
I was
7? Is
just
this a
gonna say
7?
you pick a 7. If you like it, if
Yeah.
you like whatever they're asking you, you're gonna pick 7. And if you don't like it, you're gonna pick 3.
Yeah.
That's what everybody does. And that's not exactly useful. So yeah, the 1 through 5 simplifies and kind of forces them, to pick a side, and define it. You can
Hmm.
have it whether you use a tool, a piece of paper, a spreadsheet, whatever you're using for your scorecard, let them know exactly what this means. Again, you can even keep it basic. Meets expectations, fails to meet expectations, and exceeds.
I like that. Uh, the other thing I think I'm picking up in there, but tell me if I'm right or wrong. We talked about splitting the pack, and there's different conversations. And I was saying, right, like your scorecard, a lot of people think of this as very generic, and a lot of folks think that this is kind of a apples to apples situation where we want to have, the same. Every individual helping to make that decision has the same sort of criteria by which they're evaluating a piece of software. But I also feel like you had kind of hinted at this notion that maybe not everyone has the same scorecard between one another, but just has a consistent scorecard for themselves across a selection of software that they're evaluating. Um, A, is that what you had meant? and B, either way, do you think it's a good idea or bad? Just so that it can reflect, for example, that the like technical IT team is evaluating based on these things, and the business focus team is evaluating on these things. As long as they're going into those demos with that consistent evaluation across tools, then when they come back to the table, they can have that conversation, but not necessarily be grading something on something that's frankly outside of their purview or outside of what they think is important.
Right. So generally, I recommend having one scorecard template that has your technical, and your business requirements on it. And then, yes, being very clear as to who owns, air quotes, for listeners, I'm air quoting, owns that column or that row. You do want the technical team filling out the integrations requirements, cybersecurity and the technical side, and not, the reporting dashboard. You want your executives to be grading that. But I do want all that information shared across everyone. So whether you gray out the columns, when you send it to some people to fill out, or
Mm.
their version, You gray out the columns, but they see that it's there. You want the same scorecard for everyone, because a lot of different reasons for this. It does help everybody to understand that there's more voices going on than just theirs.
Mm.
And sometimes you'll have interesting things come up of like, your head of IT will be like, oh yeah, the integrations, when we, did our technical demo, they don't actually have any current customers. So they're not meeting expectations where
Mm.
I'm concerned. But then your business owner maybe, has talked to the salesperson or whatever the instances, they're like, oh no, they told me they can do it. That scorecard helps facilitate that conversation. Okay, what does that mean? The salesperson said that they can do it. Your director of IT, head of IT said that yes, they agree they can do it, but it would be a custom integration. It's not out of the box. It's not tested. No other other client of theirs currently has it. There's a lot of risks. Maybe you're not willing to take those risks. That conversation needs to happen, and that's a pretty good way for it to come about, because you will have a lot of like, oh, they said they'll do that. Um, you could have anything from like your shadow IT department came in and they're like, we already talked, we already vetted the solution, this is what we want. You'd be like, okay, cool. We have a vendor scorecard. This is, standardized, what we use every time. Maybe you already filled it out, depending on, your relationship with them, or let's fill it out together. Same with if you have an executive who came from a conference and they saw this new tool and they're very excited about it. Having one singular scorecard helps get everyone on the same page, feel involved and heard, and can help facilitate really key discussions that need to happen before you sign a contract, ideally.
That's a huge point that I think maybe gets overlooked a bit, right? Especially when we're talking about scorecards, especially when we're talking about, numerical values on things. I think someone might look at that and go, okay, cool. We just put it into the computer and it tells us what software to choose. But actually, it's the driver of a conversation. It's like, where is
Exactly.
there disagreement where we need to dig in and go, okay, well, what did you mean by that? And I'm like, the geeky project manager in me is like, planning poker, right? It's like, okay, you thought
Mhm.
it was a 3, like it was super easy, and somebody else thought it was, a 21. Let's get those people to talk because clearly there is this
Exactly.
huge range there. There's like a lot of ground in the middle, and let's talk about it to make sure we
Yes. Yeah,
understand it.
that's exactly it. It's, yeah, a basis for conversation. And it also keeps those conversations from getting heated or getting
Mm.
emotional. You can share your information, you get down to numbers and not a he said, she said,
Mhm.
kind of conversation. So yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of nerdiness, I wonder if maybe we
Hmm.
can double click on this like collation. Well, I guess the collection and collation process. You mentioned something earlier. You said maybe you have weighted scores. Everyone's kind of filling this in. We need some place to store it. I wonder if you could kind of walk me through, what you would do if you were an organization. Like, what would you use a tool? What kind of meetings would you set up after all of the demos are done? And how do you put that information back in front of people, kind of run your calculations on it and sort out where we need to have conversations and who needs to be involved in those conversations.
Man, Galen, that's a huge question
I
with
know, I'm sorry.
a lot of variability. So, because I definitely believe in always having a standardized yet customized approach, every stakeholder is different, every business is different. The maturity of your environment, maturity of your business processes, the money you have, the time you have. Do you need a software system now? Um, or is this going to be a 6-month replacement? You need to, as the PM, you need to have a lot of tools in your toolbox to be able to like flex and accommodate what's going on. Um, and to start that, you need to know what the expectations are. So hopefully before you've scheduled a demo, when someone's come to you and been like, hey, we need you to be the project manager for getting a new software tool. Whatever stage the project is at that point, hopefully you can take a bit of time and get an understanding of, okay, who's the actual final decision makers. It can range from A larger company might have a steering committee, an IT steering committee that you need to present your findings to. Perhaps it's a smaller company, or a less visible tool, and you just have the director of that, your head of IT and the director of the business unit need to align and come into agreement. You need to know all that information before you're scheduling, hopefully before you're even talking to vendors.
Mm.
So that's a lot. And I hope that kind of answers. Did that answer the question?
I mean, I think so. I think it's a big question. I think every organization is going to be different, but I think that foresight. I think my takeaway was having the foresight to do the preparation, to have a plan, especially if you're the project manager leading this process, to reach into your arsenal and reach into those skills that you have, the soft skills to navigate, complex kind of political conversations, to
Exactly.
be able to say, okay, here is our rubric, here's our scorecard, here's where we're going to be storing them, here's how we're prepping for our sessions, here's what I'm telling vendors and asking them to show us based on the user stories that folks have submitted and the way we've prioritized it. And after these demos, I have a plan to bring all this data together, resurface it in a way that we can have a conversation about it, and also bring the right people to the table vis-a-vis that decision-making layer. We've gotten inputs along the way, but when it comes down to that final decision, it's about getting the decision makers, the business owners, and the technical leads into a room to have that conversation and make a final decision and still create an auditable trail, either A, because you might get audited, right?
Yep.
Or B, because sometimes you get a new CTO and they want to know, well, why did we pick this? Why are we saying that this is the right path? And instead of going through that process all over again, it's a way to kind of build that bridge and build that relationship with that new person to say, listen, here was our process. Here's the thought we put into it. Here's the data. And if they want to pivot,
Exactly.
obviously they can pivot, but at least they'll have that information available to them.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing, if you're having a tough time getting buy-in on a vendor scorecard, or people aren't, if you've decided to go the way where you send all the key individuals their own scorecard and then you're going to collate them together, if that's a tough sell, or maybe your business isn't ready for that. Maybe you have people who have never gone through a more mature project manager
Mhm.
focused structured project. That all can seem like a lot. At that point, you can do the vendor scorecard together. Say, okay, after our demos, this is what we're going to be filling out. I'm going to schedule 45 minutes, and hopefully it's only 45 minutes, and let's fill this out together. That way it is the true value of it being a conversation um and decision making tool. It's like more active feeling, and a lot of people
Mhm.
do, especially business leaders, do like to hash things out together. So whether you're in the same room, whether you're in different rooms, fill out together and be like,
Mhm.
okay, we're grading these vendors that we all saw. These are the 3 vendors that we watched. We're going to complete at the end of this meeting. We're completing a vendor scorecard, and we're all in consensus, hopefully, at the end of this meeting. So doing one all together can be a solution at that point.
I like that. It's like it's not a quiz and they are not Olympic
Right.
judges. We can do this collaboratively. It's a discussion. It is a discussion. So
It is.
I really like that idea for sure. Listen, when it's all said and done, some people might say that, you know what, when it comes to software selection, you can't make everyone happy. So how do you manage expectations along the way so that the folks within your company who did provide input, who do have stake in this decision, um, how do you manage their expectations so that they don't become disgruntled about the final decision?
Yeah, so here's another reason I like vendor scorecards,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you weight the criteria. So you want to keep in mind why you need a tool, not just what tool are you getting, and like don't name your project X software implementation. Please don't do that. Like don't name any vendor. That's another thing I see sometimes that happens. Um, don't do that. It's your selection process project. Keep in mind why you need the software, because that can sometimes be forgotten, or you can lose sight of it, especially when you have a lot of When people are ready to make a decision, they're like, no, we want this software, just buy it, turn it
Mhm.
on, let's use it on Monday. Um, Always be asking, okay, is what the vendor said, does this, does their proposal, does this contract, did the demo, everything, all the information you have, is it solving the business problem we're solving or what we're solving for? So keep that in mind. And you can use the vendor scorecard again as a rubric, a standardized, non emotional exercise to keep that focus. So you're not going into like, okay, well, but they did, X, Y, and Z functions really, really, really well. And then you're like, yeah, but they can't integrate with our email system. And that's a must have. So I know so and so you really liked it because you loved how they did their reporting dashboard. But, you know, so yeah, waiting, bringing the conversation back to the vendor scorecard and always, always remembering to ask, does this solve the business problem? Not, does this have fancy new features?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that. And what I love is in my head, I took a note and it said, scorecard equals transparency. I mean,
Yes.
not necessarily, not intrinsically, but that's
Right.
the use of it. It's we are being transparent about the decision that we're making, like you mentioned, so that we have an audit trail, whether it's by auditors or by people who are like, why did we make that decision?
Hmm.
But for folks going through the process, it provides that clarity, right? It provides that rigor. Here's what we're trying to achieve, sharing that vision with everybody involved in the selection process so that they understand why, they're being reminded why, the scorecard reinforces why. And then at the end, I think what's implicit here is that there is this the spirit of sharing back, right? Of
Hmm.
communicating back to everyone involved. We've made this decision, and here's why. And thank you for your participation. This is how it's scored, and just being so transparent about the process. Is that going to make everybody happy with the choice? Yeah, probably not. To your point, right? There's going to be the folks
Right.
who are like, but that one had that really cool integration feature. I really wanted to use that. How dare we choose this other tool?
Yeah.
But at least you've got this rationale to back it up, and you have had the right involvement throughout, so that the disgruntledness is going to be about, I really wanted to try the natural language,
Yeah.
automation interface, and not that was the wrong tool for what we want to do.
Right.
And now
Yeah.
and
You
now
want
I hate my
you
job.
want respect. You want respect for the decision. You don't have to be happy with the decision, but you want everybody to respect the decision. And they can only do that when they have honest and transparent discussions about it, when they can see, like, okay, yeah, we're not just going with this one because so and so's brother works there. I don't know.
Hmm.
I mean, like, and not to be flippant, that is an
Hmm.
honest,
Hmm.
problem in a lot of businesses. It happens. Um, but yeah, it can help. The decision has to be respected, not loved.
I really like that. Olivia, it's always great having you on the show. There's so much good stuff in our conversation today. I think the thing that really is going to stick with me is just like, this notion of having two demos. I don't know. It kind of blew my mind a little bit because I think intuitively I want to keep this group together. So we're making a group decision, but it doesn't mean that the demo itself needs to be the same demo that everyone sees. In fact, it's probably not a good idea because there's so much ground to cover and the conversations are so different, but you can tie it back together with something like a scorecard and have a collaborative conversation afterwards so that you're still involving everybody, but not wasting people's time. I
That's
think that
exactly.
is such a cool piece of
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah, because your power user doesn't need to be there when you're talking about how often jobs are going to run, and exactly what the API looks like. And, vice versa. It's to be really respectful of everyone's time and not gloss over anything, and not to wait too long in the process for the business and IT to come together in agreement. That shouldn't happen during implementation.
Last question. Last question, trick question.
Another
If
one.
you, yeah, another trick question just to close us out. Let's say you are a project manager and you're working in an organization where you see that a software selection process is not being given that rigor. Maybe even is, oh, that's my brother's software company. We're going to get a good deal. Um, what can you do? What can you say to like maybe put some rigor into that process maybe take the bias away from that selection process? What are the conversations that you might need to have?
You want to make sure you have a relationship, a respectful relationship with whoever is holding that opinion. You want to verify that they are responsible for the final decision. Sometimes they're not. And you kind of have to go to the person who is making the decision and be like, hey, I need your help. I need to leverage your authority. I need you to help me out. If they are the person making the decision, um, talk to them, hear them out, but ask, can you do a vendor scorecard together? Let them know that you want to make sure that all the bases are covered, that you are really excited about the tool. Don't be dismissive. Work on your relationship. You might work with this person in the future for a long time going forward. You never know what's going to happen. Maybe you do the vendor scorecard together and you let them then you're using like a Socratic method of like, okay, tell me about what you learned about the integrations. And they're like, oh, we didn't talk about that. Cool, let's do that. Let's talk to them about it. So yeah, it's kind of a Socratic method of let them kind of learn by unfolding requirements like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't the best, tool. Maybe it is the best. And you're like, this is great. Thank you so much for this information. You're helping, but we also still need to vet. Let's compare it to one other option at least. Again, I keep coming back to even the last time we spoke, and probably every time I speak to anybody, just be really forthcoming and transparent. Let them know, like, this has to work for IT. This has to work for the business unit. This has to work for current state and for future state. And yeah, do it together.
Awesome. I love it. Olivia, so nice to have you. I think we've done a really deep dive into the software selection process, especially these demos and the decision-making process afterwards. So I hope our listeners got a lot of value, and looking forward to having you back on the show again, because I know that there is a lot of ground that we can cover and more trick questions for me to ask you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I hope people did learn something. Maybe they're thinking about, selection process different, thinking about demos, maybe not dreading them, not letting them be bulldozed, decisions being bulldozed over. I really hope this was helpful. I always love talking with you. Galen, you're great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So what do you think? Is a software demo worth your team's time? Or is it a bit of a dog and pony show that sidesteps a more practical deep dive and evaluation period? Leave your thoughts and stories in the comments below. And if you want to hone your skills as a strategic project leader, come and join our collective. Head over to thedigitalprojectmanager.com/membership to get access to a supportive community that shares knowledge, solves complex challenges, and shapes the future of our craft together. From robust templates and monthly training sessions that save you time and energy, to the peer support offered through our discussion forum, community events, and mastermind groups, being a member of our community means having over 1,000 people in your corner as you navigate your career in digital project delivery. And if you like what you heard today, please subscribe and stay in touch on thedigitalprojectmanager.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.